Hello, everyone. Today, we revisit a story that began in whispers, grew into quiet admiration, and then fell into half a decade of silence. For 5 long years, actor Kim Woo-bin and actress Shin, one of Korea's most beloved and mysterious celebrity couples, stayed away from the spotlight. No interviews, no joint appearances, no public confessions. The world waited, curious yet patient, wondering what truth lay behind those calm, unreadable smiles. And now, at last, the silence has been broken. And the two appeared together for the first time in years, hand in hand, before flashing cameras and trembling reporters. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Their story, one that began with love, endured through illness, distance, and uncertainty, was finally ready to be told. But no one was prepared for what they revealed. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't gossip. It was something deeper, raw, human, and heartbreakingly real. For the first time, Kim Woo-bin spoke openly about the years he fought against his illness, and about the woman who stood quietly behind him through every sleepless night. And Shin, usually composed and measured, spoke with tears in her eyes about what it truly meant to love someone, not when everything is perfect, but when everything hurts. "We didn't stay silent because we wanted to hide," Kim said softly. "We stayed silent because we needed to survive, together." The room went still. It wasn't the kind of confession the entertainment world expected. It was something far more powerful. A reminder that behind the lights, cameras, and red carpets, there were two people simply trying to hold on to each other when the world around them was falling apart. Over the past years, the public only saw fragments: a brief hospital sighting, a quiet vacation photo, an award speech with her name unspoken yet deeply implied. What unfolded during those unseen years was a story that could move even the coldest heart. As reporters leaned forward, Shin reached for his hand and continued. "People kept asking why we disappeared. The truth is, there were days when we didn't even know if we'd have a tomorrow. But through it all, he never stopped smiling. That's how I knew we'd be okay." Her voice trembled, but her eyes never wavered. It was the first time in public that she had spoken about the pain they both endured. The late nights at the hospital, fear of losing everything, and the quiet strength it took to keep their love alive. The confession was not planned. According to a production staff member present that day, neither of them had agreed to discuss their private life. But something about that moment, the crowd, the flashing lights, the overwhelming relief of having made it this far, opened the floodgates of 5 years' worth of emotion. And just like that, the truth the world had been waiting for was no longer a mystery. It was a revelation of love that endured through silence, of pain that transformed into resilience. Two hearts that refused to give up, even when the cameras weren't watching. As the interview continued, Kim Woo-bin spoke again, his voice lower now, filled with gratitude. "I used to think love meant protecting someone. But she showed me that sometimes love means letting yourself be protected, too." Those words struck every listener like a quiet storm. Shin turned toward him, smiling through her tears, a look of quiet victory, of love that had weathered everything fame and fate could throw their way. By the end of the interview, the silence that had once separated them from the world was gone. In its place stood truth, raw and unfiltered. The kind of truth that doesn't seek sympathy or spectacle, only understanding. And when they finally stood up, bowing politely to the reporters, the entire room rose with them, not out of obligation, but out of respect. In that moment, everyone understood. Sometimes silence isn't absence. Sometimes, silence is what keeps love alive long enough to find its voice again. The flashes never stopped. Dozens of camera shutters cracked through the air like lightning. Bursts reflected off marble and glass, each one capturing a fragment of something no one thought they would ever see again. And then, the door opened. Kim Woo-bin stepped in first, tall, sharp-shouldered, his once soft features drawn by years of illness and recovery. Behind him, Shin followed with quiet grace, her black suit simple, her eyes unguarded. 5 years had passed since they last stood together in front of the world. The crowd froze. Reporters, influencers, even the sound technicians forgot to breathe. What could they possibly say after all that silence? They sat side by side. Between them, their hands met, fingers interlocked like roots that had learned how to hold on through storms. The host cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly through the microphone. "Mr. Kim Woo-bin, Ms. Shin, thank you for being here. The public has waited a long time. Why today? Wu Bin lowered his gaze. The lights glared against his skin. But he didn't blink. Because today, he said softly, I can finally speak without fear. A murmur rippled through the room. Shin turned to him, the smallest smile ghosting her lips. He continued. For years we tried to keep the world out. Thought if we stayed quiet, the noise would fade. But silence can be its own kind of storm. He paused, then added almost in a whisper. We weren't hiding. We were surviving. Line hot like thunder. The journalists shifted uneasily. Some looked at each other, unsure if they were witnessing a confession or a resurrection. Shin-min's turn came. She reached for the microphone, fingers trembling slightly. When you love someone who is hurting, she began. Words stop working. You learn to speak in other ways, with your hands. Eyes, your patience. She looked at him, then back at the room. For 5 years, we didn't make statements. We just held on. Her voice cracked at the last word. Covered it with a small breath and smiled again, not to the cameras, but to herself. As if reminding her heart that it was still allowed to beat in public. Moderator tried to move on. But the air was too heavy with emotion. One reporter stood. Mr. Kim, during those 5 years, what was the hardest moment? Wu Bin hesitated. His throat worked before sound came. The nights, he said. Treatment ended and the world went quiet. I could hear everything, my pulse, my fear, her breathing. That's when I realized silence isn't empty. It's full of everything you haven't said. No one typed. No one whispered. Looked at Shin-min again. She sat beside me in the hospital every night. Sometimes she fell asleep holding my hand. When I woke, she'd still be there. Told her to rest, to go home. She said, this is home. The room exhaled. Even the cameras seemed to soften. Their flashes less intrusive. As if afraid to break the fragile peace unfolding before them. Then came the question everyone feared. Were there moments you thought of giving up, on the relationship? Shin-min closed her eyes briefly. As if scanning years of pain behind her eyelids. Yes, she said. But not on him, on myself. There were days I felt too weak to be strong for both of us. I used to cry in the car, wipe my face, and smile before walking into his room. I thought if he saw me cry, he'd lose hope. Wu Bin shook his head slowly, eyes glistening. I knew, he murmured. Even when she hid it, I knew. Love doesn't need noise to be heard. A collective sigh moved through the hall. For the next 30 minutes, the pair unfolded their story piece by piece, not a scandal. Not a publicity stunt. Anatomy of endurance. 5 years of unanswered rumors. 5 years of learning how to breathe again. 5 years of rediscovering what it meant to be alive. Every word carried weight. Every silence between them carried more. Outside, the world had kept spinning, award shows, premieres, new dramas. Their small apartment by the Han River. Time had slowed to a whisper. Rain tapped against the windows the night the doctors gave the diagnosis. Shin-min had been filming a drama in Jeju when the call came. She dropped everything, the script, the schedule, the perfect image, and boarded the first plane back to Seoul. He was pale when she arrived. His smile too forced. Don't look at me like that, he said, half joking. Didn't answer. She just walked forward and held him. For days afterward, they barely spoke. Dia caught wind of his illness soon after, and within hours their phones flooded with calls. She silenced hers, deleted the apps, and whispered. From now on, the only thing that matters is you. There were endless nights of medication, fatigue, fear. He would wake drenched in sweat, breath ragged. Sat up instantly, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. Sometimes he'd whisper, you should sleep. And she'd reply, I'll sleep when you do. He never did, not really. There were too many questions without answers. Too many tomorrows that felt uncertain. Months passed. Seasons blurred. When his hair began to fall, she cut hers short too, quietly. Without telling him. He woke to find strands of her hair on the pillow beside him. What did you do? He asked. His voice breaking. I just wanted us to match. She said with a gentle laugh. And for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Outside, tabloids speculated about their mysterious disappearance. Inside, they celebrated every small victory, a clean scan, A meal finished. A laugh that lasted more than a second. There were moments of light, too. One evening, she dragged him to the rooftop of their building. The city below glittered like liquid glass. "Look," she said, pointing to the skyline. "Everyone down there thinks silence means absence." "You know better." He nodded, breathing in the cold air. "Silence," he said, "is how love rests." In that stillness, the city's noise faded. The night after the press conference, Seoul felt unusually quiet. Outside their apartment, the Han River reflected a blur of city lights. But inside, the only glow came from a single lamp on the kitchen table. 2 cups of untouched tea cooled between them. Anna exhaled first. "It's strange," she said. "For years we were silent because we were afraid to speak. That we finally did. I don't know what to do with the noise." Kim Woo-bin smiled faintly. "Then let's not do anything. Let the world talk. We already said what mattered." They sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic. No cameras. No scripts. Just the sound of breathing, proof of survival. It had been winter when things were worst. Too weak to stand for long, she was too tired to pretend. One night he asked her to promise something. "I can't make it, don't disappear. Keep living. Keep acting." She cut him off. "Don't say that. I need to." "Then listen," she whispered. "If you go, I'll follow. So you'd better not." That was the first time she saw fear leave his eyes, replaced by a stubborn spark. He fought harder after that. Treatment, pain, the endless routine, and her laughter, however forced, threaded through every day like sunlight behind clouds. When the doctors finally said the word remission, neither of them cried. They just sat there holding hands. If any sound might shatter the fragile peace they'd built. 5 years later, the world was applauding their love story. Every news outlet replayed the footage of their joined hands. Every headline crowned them the couple that taught us patience. But neither of them read the articles. Spent the day in the park instead. Children ran past, cherry blossoms fell into her hair. He brushed one away and said quietly, "You know, the cameras only saw us smiling. They never saw the nights you held me while I shook." Looked up at him. "That's okay. Those nights were ours." Walked until dusk. The river glowing like gold. At one point he stopped and took a deep breath of the cool air. "Do you ever regret the silence?" "No," she answered. "It kept us human." The wind carried their words across the water. A month later, they agreed to one final interview, a calm, studio-lit conversation for a documentary about healing. Producer asked, "What did you learn from 5 years of silence?" Kim Woo-bin thought for a moment. "That love doesn't always sound like words. Sometimes it's the sound of someone refusing to leave." Shin added, "Silence can be heavy. But it can also be sacred. When you sit in it together, it becomes prayer." The interviewer, caught off guard, blinked away tears behind the camera. The episode went viral across Asia. Clips of their answers flooded social media with captions like "This is real." Hashtags trended for days. 5 years off silence. True love doesn't shout. But the couple stayed offline. They had no interest in becoming a symbol. They'd already lived the story, they didn't need to sell it. Weeks later, Shin found a folded piece of paper tucked inside an old notebook on his desk. It was dated 3 years earlier. During his treatment. "If I don't get to tell you again," it read. "Thank you for every morning you pretended not to be tired. For the soup you never finished because you kept feeding me first. For cutting your hair so I wouldn't feel strange in my own skin. If love has a sound, it's your heartbeat next to mine." She never mentioned finding it. Some truths, she believed, were meant to stay quietly between hearts. Spring returned. Kim Woo-bin stood on set again for the first time in years. Cameras rolling, crew bustling. Shin visited during lunch break, carrying coffee in both hands. He saw her and grinned, that same unguarded grin the world had missed. When their eyes met, no words were necessary. Later that night, he posted a rare message to fans. "Silence is not the absence of love. It's where love learns to breathe." Within hours, thousands of replies flooded in. But he didn't check them. He was already asleep. Her head resting on his shoulder. The city humming softly beyond the window. And somewhere, in the quiet between heartbeats, 5 years of silence turned into music. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it hides in the stillness between two breaths. Kim Woo Bin and Shin Min are reminded the world that silence can heal. That waiting can be an act of devotion. That truth, once spoken, needs no echo. Thank you for reading this story of courage, patience, a kind of love that survives even when words do not. Remind you that somewhere in your own quiet moments, someone's heart is still listening. Every love story leaves behind a sound. For some, it's laughter. For others, it's a song. But for Kim Woo Bin and Shin Min, it was silence. A silence that spoke louder than applause. Louder than fame, louder than fear. They didn't rush to prove their love. They didn't perform it for the world. They simply lived it, quietly, faithfully, completely. And when they finally spoke, their words didn't need to be perfect. They just needed to be true. Theirs is not a story of celebrities returning to the spotlight. It's the story of two people who found strength in stillness. Chose each other again and again, even when no one was watching. In a world that never stops talking, their silence became the loudest confession of all. Love, when it is real, does not need to shout to be heard. To everyone who stayed until the end of this story, thank you. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for believing that quiet devotion still exists. May you, too, find someone who stays beside you. Through the long nights, through the fear, through the silence. Because sometimes, love doesn't need to say a word. It just needs to stay. The end.